Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
Hi, this is Jill Schlesinger, CBS News business analyst, certified financial planner, and the host of the Jill on Money podcast. With the new year upon us, there's no better time to take control of your financial life. And the Jill on Money podcast is here to help. It's your questions that make it possible for me to provide unconventional and, I hope, entertaining insights on your money and, more importantly, on your life. Follow and listen to Jill on Money wherever you get your podcasts.
Five dead teenagers. That was the first year. 11 dead teenagers. That was the second year. Hardinville had been through unimaginable tragedy. Twice. Big cities may have seen this kind of carnage before, but not Hardinville. Never could the citizens of Hardinville have imagined that something so horrific could happen there, and certainly not twice. The first year was 1980, Labor Day, last day of summer before everyone went back to school or work, back to their real lives. It was usually a day of celebration and self-reflection, one last time to party and spend quality time with friends and family. But this day was anything but a celebration. The night before Labor Day, a man named Harold Hughes had escaped from a mental institution and come back to his home looking for death. The citizens of Hardinville were unaware of Harold's escape. Apparently, the local law enforcement didn't want to create a panic. They assumed that the cops would be able to track him down easily. There were very few places to hide in Hardinville. It had always been a bright, open, sunny place. The kind of place you hope to one day raise your family. The kind of place you hope to see your loved ones grow old and prosper. But Harold Hughes turned the dream of Hardinville into a nightmare. Harold had gone to his old home, which had since been condemned. When Harold was just 6 years old, he had murdered his parents and babysitter in that very house. Realtors tried to sell it, but nobody would dare live where the infamous Hughes murders had taken place. So they had to just board it up, wait until someone was brave enough to tear it all down. Even destroying the house struck fear into the eyes of anyone who dared stand near it. The cops, who had been assigned to track Harold down, patrolled the streets quietly. The only person who seemed sure of Harold's whereabouts was the psychiatrist, Dr. Gibson. Dr. Gibson had been Harold's doctor during all 15 years that Harold had spent inside those walls. The walls of the Longfellow Institute, a renowned yet highly controversial facility that housed some of the more notorious murderers of Middle America. Harold was the youngest patient inside. He had grown from boy to man within those walls, those cold, bleak walls. Whatever entered this world with him had only grown more ugly and darker by the time he had escaped. According to Dr. Gibson, Harold had never spoken, not once, during all 15 years. Dr. Gibson had become consumed with Harold. He said that under no circumstances should Harold ever be allowed to leave. And then, the day before Labor Day, 1980, Harold escaped from his fifth-floor window. By the time Dr. Gibson had gone to Harold's house, it was too late. Harold had already murdered the two teenagers who had snuck inside to get high. They had been stabbed through their skulls by an ice pick. Dr. Gibson begged the mayor to put the town on alert, but the mayor refused, claiming that he didn't want to cause a panic on Labor Day weekend. Seeing how this was a beach town and all, they depended on money from this weekend to carry over into the fall. The cops would find him before anyone was harmed. The mayor was sure of it. He was wrong. That night, Harold had tracked down his only living relative, his half-sister, Jamie, the only person who shared his bloodline, living the quiet, peaceful life that Hardinville had been accustomed to. She was now a senior in high school, eager to go away to college next year. She had the school picked out already, Georgetown. She dreamed of becoming a lawyer. Having never left Hardinville, she could not have been more excited. And then Harold Hughes showed up to her doorstep. Harold murdered Jamie's two best friends, PJ and Shauna, as well as Shauna's boyfriend, Bill. Harold's primary weapon of choice became a hammer. He would cave in their skulls and then nail them up against the wall. Harold was brutal. Miraculously, the person whom Harold wanted most of all, Jamie, was the sole survivor. She stabbed Harold in the eye with her lucky pen, and then Harold fell backwards off of the third-floor balcony out into the pavement. When Dr. Gibson arrived, Harold's body had disappeared. Cops from the entire state were notified, but Harold was nowhere to be found. For 1 whole year, he was missing. Jamie would spend that next year in physical therapy, trying to recover from the stab wounds Harold had inflicted into her back. And it was then, right as Jamie was beginning to feel like herself again, for the very first time, she seemed capable of putting some of her past behind her to look ahead at the future. Harold came back. Labor Day, 1981. Jamie was about to finish her final session of physical therapy when Harold walked into the hospital and shut off the power. It went dark. Nobody had any clue about Harold. Everyone just went on with their lives, assuming he would never come back. What sense would that make, they thought? They were wrong. 2 security guards, 3 nurses, 5 doctors, and Jamie's boyfriend, Bert, all of them murdered by Harold. Miraculously, Jamie survived, again. She pushed Harold into the basement furnace and watched him light on fire. She pushed Harold into the basement furnace and watched him light on fire. She saw him burn. Then she ran out of the basement and closed the door, trapping him inside. As she escaped to watch the hospital burn down with Harold still inside, her and Dr. Gibson could finally breathe a sigh of relief, knowing that the beast which had tortured their lives was finally going back to hell where it was born. They watched the flames light up the dark sky, turning Harold into the black ash that made his cold heart beat. But when the dust settled, Harold was never found. He had escaped. Again. That couldn't be. Jamie was sure she had trapped him in the basement. Everyone thought that she was crazy. If she had trapped him, there would be a body. But with no body, they just assumed she had imagined the whole thing. The town turned on her and sent her away into a mental institution where she would be under the surveillance of the one person who believed her, Dr. Gibson. He swore to help Jamie. Yet deep down, he knew Harold was still alive, waiting. Now, it was Labor Day, 1982. The entire town of Hardinville had to wonder, would Harold Hughes come home for a third time? But this time, the town would be ready to fight. The mayor and local law enforcement had failed to protect its citizens twice. It had led to the deaths of 16 people. The new sheriff of Hardinville issued a town-wide curfew of 7 p.m. With the exception of law enforcement and medical facilities, all businesses would have to be shut down. All residents would have to remain inside until 7 a.m. on Tuesday morning. Labor Day weekend was to be spent inside, where they could be safe. Safe from Harold Hughes. The mayor was in an uproar. So were local business owners. They knew this weekend made them and the town money, but the new sheriff did not care. He was willing to lose money if it meant people didn't lose their lives. That was the motto of Sheriff Brunson. For the first time in the history of Hardinville, the town had shut down. Do you have a problem with that? You can go to hell, where Harold Hughes lives and breathes. The name sent shivers up the spines of everyone in the town hall who listened on that Tuesday before Labor Day. He televised the announcement so that people had the proper amount of time to get supplies. His tone only intensified as he spoke directly into the camera. I'll be damned if I'm going to let him terrorize my citizens again. Not on my watch. I'll be damned. If only Brunson knew how right those words were.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
You've built a killer sports podcast. You bring the heat every week, and you have a loyal audience. But when it comes to monetizing, you're still leaving too much on the table. That's where the Odyssey Creator Lab comes in. We host your show for free. No fees, no catch. You focus on delivering the play-by-play and hot takes, and our experienced sales team goes to work bringing in ad dollars. Let's turn those downloads into revenue. Apply now at creators.odyssey.com and start making money from your podcast.
2-for-1 guns. And that was part of the sale going on at Big Bucks Arms, also known as BBA, the local gun store in Hardenville. Not every gun was applicable to the sale. Of course, you only found that out once you were in the store. And then Big Buck would explain that it only applied to a certain type of handgun, a, shall we say, cheaper brand of handgun. But that didn't stop citizens from all over town coming in to load up on weapons and ammunition for Labor Day weekend. It was easy to get approved, minimal paperwork, 18 and older. What mattered right now was your safety and the safety of your family. The residents were shocked to see how little the national media cared about their recent tragic history. What little attention it did gain was met with an almost mocking sensibility. Outsiders saw what happened and had only one question. Why not leave? Because Hardenville was their home and they refused to lose. Leaving meant defeat. They would not let this boogeyman get the best of them. So it only strengthened their resolve to carry on with their lives and band together. At least until that curfew. Then people started to take sides. Do we stay inside, play it safe, or do we go outside, face the beast head on? There had been no reports of Harold Hughes anywhere. How had this man avoided any detection? He had no face. During his entire rampage on both previous Labor Day weekends, Harold wore a mask. The same mask. It was plain white that illuminated his face in the dark. Practical? No. But that's why he did it. He wanted you to know he was there, coming to get you. Beyond that, Harold wore a very plain dark blue janitor's uniform. He had stolen it from the first person he killed on the road after escaping the institution. He was about 6 foot tall, yet reports of his height seemed to vary, as if he could shift in stature. And his face, his actual face, well, only 3 people had ever seen it. First was Dr. Gibson. Gibson described it well enough so that a sketch artist could make a rendering and have it posted all over town. But the face didn't seem real. His eyes curved up. One was nearly closed shut. His nose was almost flat. His mouth was small and triangular. His hair was white and stringy. The cops mocked Gibson when they saw the final composition. Nobody would believe he actually looked like this because it didn't look human. Exactly, Gibson would say. Harold Hughes is not of this world. The second person who had seen his face was Jamie. She had taken off his mask after hiding in the attic while he was looking for her. She sprang out of her wooden chest box of family heirlooms, ripped off his patent white mask, and stabbed him right in the eyeball with her lucky pen. The second time she saw his face was right before she locked him inside the basement. Rather than chase after her up the basement stairs, he simply stared at her from the furnace as his mask started to melt. Yet his face seemed resilient, impervious to the fire. Her recounting of these details only strengthened the local belief that she had gone crazy. 3 hours until curfew begins. 4 p.m. on the Friday before Labor Day. The streets were flooded. Everyone seemed to want their final gasp of breath before they had to go inside. Parents were on their lawns commiserating with their neighbors, showing off their new weapons. Teenagers were all hanging out in the park, planning how they could escape their curfew to hang out. Especially the ones in relationships. The guys swore to blow off this lame mandate and find a way to get lucky that weekend, no matter what it took. Those without families were all getting one last beer at the bar. Liquor sales had skyrocketed. It was 10 Labor Day weekends in one. It was not a great time to be single. Some used this as an excuse to shack up for the weekend, put their blossoming relationships to the test by spending 3 days together locked inside. The alternative was to go outside. But even the most skeptical resident had at least a small part inside of them wondering, would Harold return? 2 hours until curfew begins. Sheriff Brunson was going over routes and procedures with all of his detectives and deputies. This would be their biggest test yet. They had a lot of ground to cover. Seeing how the state had little interest in their troubles, each officer had to do much more than had ever been required of them. Some had a personal vendetta against Harold Hughes, including Sheriff Brunson. Jamie's best friend, PJ, was his daughter. So they loaded up on artillery and went their separate ways. The police station was nearly empty, minus Shelley on dispatch and Keith on watch. Shelley had come out of retirement to work dispatch so that every other available officer could be on patrol. Keith had just turned 18. He had a vested interest in this as well. His father was one of the doctors killed at the hospital last year. The physical therapist who had helped Jamie regain her strength. He had never fired a gun before. Most of them had not, but they swore an oath to protect the citizens. 1 hour until curfew begins. The cops were now on the streets, talking through their megaphones, admonishing people to go inside. The neighbors on their lawns went inside. The teenagers mockingly agreed to leave the park and head home. Bars and restaurants emptied. Shop owners locked their doors and turned off their lights. The sun kept shining, but the town had gone silent. It was curfew. Now the question on everyone's mind: where was Harold? Friday night was a breeze. Either you believed in Harold Hughes or you didn't. If you didn't, you couldn't wait to gloat about it. All of this was an overreaction. The skeptics obeyed the curfew even stricter than the non-skeptics because they were ecstatic to let their neighbors know how much they were acting like big babies. They would watch the local newscasts, arguing with their TV anytime Harold Hughes was not mentioned. There was a decent percentage of residents that thought Harold never existed at all, that he was just some imaginary boogeyman that the government had created to control them. Increased spending, shift alliances. Conspiracy nuts were having a field day. Some of them even started their own radio station in a basement that seemed solely focused on proving that Harold Hughes had never existed. The station was known as HHFU. You can guess what the letters stood for. But it had gained some popularity leading up to this weekend. The host, Josh Morgan, had become a quasi-celebrity in town. The cops who didn't believe in Harold saw him as a beacon of truth. Cops who did believe in Harold saw him as a nut job. Where you stood on Josh Morgan flashed a light on where you stood. He represented an identity, an attitude. Sheriff Brunson tried to shut him down, more than once, but he was unable to, which made Morgan even more appealing to a certain type of resident. If you were disillusioned, unhappy, lonely, you gravitated to Morgan because he stood for you when nobody else would. No matter what you thought about Hughes, Brunson, or Morgan, that first night of the curfew, everyone was on their best behavior. They stayed inside, and the town went dark. Saturday morning was a relief. The curfew had gone without a hitch. No Harold Hughes, no harm done. Everyone obeyed, even Josh Morgan, who had promised to go outside and disobey the curfew to show it was just a hoax. He, too, had stayed inside. He said it was because the police had been instructed to arrest him if he stepped foot outside of his bunker. Sheriff Brunson said this was not true. He also clarified to the press that it was not a bunker, it was a basement. in his mother's house. Brunson could never resist poking Morgan, or the mayor, now ex-mayor, who was forced to resign after Labor Day last year when he failed to provide proper security measures at the hospital where Harold Hughes had struck and killed all of those people. This now ex-mayor, Alan Braun, was working in real estate and planning a run for governor. His main platform promise was to not let the government control you. This rang a bell with a certain section of Hardinville. There was a lot of crossover between Braun and Morgan. Their festering allegiance seemed to be sparking a greater disconnect between the residents depending on which side of town you lived on. Brunson would not let them get in his way. Not this weekend, at least. And so far, they had not. Like any other small town, Hardinville loved gossip. When word spread that a Harold Hughes mask had been found in the middle of Peepers Hollow Road, theories began to fly in every conceivable direction. Was it Harold? Was it a prank? Was it propaganda? Citizens seemed almost equally divided. The elderly and parents of small children all seemed to think it was, in fact, Harold Hughes. He had returned to enact his continued revenge, and this time he would show his true face. Teenagers all seemed to be either taking credit for the prank or theorizing on which classmate had done it. The Braun and Morgan folks were convinced this was a stunt by local law enforcement to make the curfew seem legit. Friday night had been a breeze, but news of this supposed mask was making Saturday more anxious. One question nobody seemed to be asking: where was Jamie? She was gone and nobody knew her whereabouts, except for Dr. Gibson. He mentioned in passing that she was in a safe place, but otherwise he remained diligent about keeping her location hidden. He said any information about where she could be put her in harm. He promised to never let anything happen to Jamie. He said this to Sheriff Brunson over coffee on Saturday morning. Gibson had returned to Hardinville because he said it was never about Jamie. She was just a vessel for him to cause destruction. Hardinville was always going to be the target. He would return here again and again until he felt satisfied. What will satisfy him? Brunson asked. Gibson was trembling as he looked up and spoke softly. If you asked that of the devil, what would he say?
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
Welcome to Radio Rental. The scariest stories you've ever heard in your life. All told by real people. And off we go.
This wasn't a human being that I saw. There's something here in this house, something not of this world.
There was a woman moving through the hall. I stepped back and I was completely alone.
Radio Rental is available now. Listen for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Saturday night was getting buzzed. The town had remained relatively dry on Friday. Everyone was on edge. Even the ones who pretended to not be were still nervous. Getting drunk was nobody's best course of action on Friday night. But now that everyone had survived the first night, they seemed to be getting loose with the liquor. Families were seen crossing streets to join up and hang out with their other families. Kids being with other kids gave everyone a sense of relief. The silver lining to the curfew is that if you did believe in Harold Hughes, it made you care more about your neighbors because you may need their help. Multiple teenagers were picked up by cop cars after being spotted outside. These kids came from families that had less than stellar reputations. The cops would walk the teen up to the front door and reinforce to their parents that the curfew was in effect until Tuesday at 7 a.m. In these instances, the parents seemed dismissive and usually under some kind of influence. One cop, Officer Chalk, had sworn off his whole curfew business as nonsense. He was only doing it because it meant getting paid some overtime. His partner, Lucy, didn't want to be combative, so she let him vent, counting down the minutes until they could take their break. Every officer was working an 18-hour shift. It was encouraged to have officers let their partners take brief naps during this detail to avoid becoming sleep-deprived. When Officer Chalk drove by 2 teenagers hanging out in the park, he didn't even stop. Lucy told him they had to pick them up. Chalk responded that if they were too stupid to avoid getting chopped up by Harold Hughes, that's on them. Lucy checked her watch. She couldn't wait until Tuesday, but that was a long time from now. Prospect Street was getting rowdy. This was the more upscale part of Hardinville. It was a gated-off little community with its own private security. Residents on the street were hanging outside together, drinking and laughing, as if this was Mardi Gras. Brunson received word of this and drove over there himself to scold everyone on his megaphone to go inside. So they did. He knew that once he drove away, they would all come back outside. His grip on the law was beginning to loosen. Sunday morning was gorgeous. There was a slight chill in the air and half of the town was hungover. Jokes about how there was going to be an abundance of Harold Hughes-inspired babies being born in 9 months began to spread like wildfire. Apparently a lot of people had gotten a little frisky last night. What better way to pass the time was a very common response. This didn't sit well with anyone who was being forced to work, specifically the cops. Police and healthcare workers were being forced to work while everyone else was being encouraged to stay home, party, and get laid. This was not good for team morale amongst Brunson's troops. They had been given maps with specific navigation strategies, and yet nearly half of the cop cars were now parked somewhere shady so they could enjoy their coffee. Coffee, which had all seemed to have been bought from the same place. Morning Go. Morning Go was a swanky coffee shop that was recently opened by ex-mayor Ellen Braun. It was a way for him to try and win back favor among the townsfolk, especially the more wealthy townsfolk who would prefer someone make coffee for them as opposed to making it themselves. Sheriff Brunson walked with a snarl and lowered his aviator sunglasses. Braun was holding court and laughing near the front while his baristas took orders. Brunson took out the megaphone and instructed everyone to vacate immediately. Go home. Stay inside. Failure to do so would lead to steep fines. Braun put on his brightest, whitest smile and jokingly told Brunson to stop being so grumpy and let these fine people have some coffee. You know what the people need right now, Sheriff? Braun said. People need people. Brunson told his deputies to start escorting everyone out. They followed suit. They could tell Brunson was not messing around. Apparently these people had forgotten that his own teenage daughter had been brutally murdered 2 years ago. Brunson slowly walked up to the front where only Braun was now standing. He told them that he would be more than happy to personally escort Braun down to the station. Braun did not handle aggression well when the cameras were not turned on. Yet everyone who'd witnessed their vocal confrontation knew that Brunson vs. Braun was going to be an ongoing heavyweight fight for the foreseeable future. Morning Go was not the only place that had opened up on Sunday morning. Garden Catering, the premier spot for ham, egg, and cheese sandwiches, had also swung open their doors. The owner, Mario, apologized to Brunson and said that he only wanted to open for the morning, since he kept getting calls from people that they could use a good breakfast. Once again, Brunson was being forced to play the villain. The longer they went without seeing Harold Hughes, the more of a figment of their collective imagination that he became. Brunson knew that it was just a matter of time until Harold disappeared altogether, and that would be when he came back. Sunday night felt like Saturday night. Brunson was getting calls from all over town by officers who were having to repeatedly admonish the same people over and over again to stay inside. It was tripping them up, having to continuously go back to the same spot and yell at the same people. Brunson said to start handing out fines. If that doesn't work, bring him downtown. The first person to go downtown was Josh Morgan. He had done what he had promised. He had gone outside, and he had stayed outside. Some might think that Morgan knew he would get arrested and brought to the station, which was arguably the safest place to be in town. But Brunson knew this was just a publicity splash to get his name more recognition. So he told his officers that the only person who wasn't getting arrested this weekend was Josh Morgan. Morgan seemed almost scared. He was driven back home and dropped off. When he told the officers he would just go back outside, one of them responded by saying, "Good." That officer was Chalk, who told Lucy while driving away that he could really use a drink, a stiff one. Then he asked Lucy if she could use a stiff one. She knew that he wasn't talking about liquor. She gripped her gun, just for a moment, just to know she could. The next place that had to get shut down was Dive 55. The owner, Bobby, was outside smoking a cigarette when Brunson pulled into the lot. Before Brunson could even shut his car door, Bobby was putting his hands behind his back, sarcastically, speaking loud enough for the nearby patrons to hear and watch. "Sheriff, I mean you no harm. Half the people in here are family. The others are just deadbeats, trying to sleep their way into my family." This got a big laugh from everyone inside, who were most likely waiting for Brunson to show up. Bobby was a showman, everyone's favorite bartender. Dive 55 had been a Hardinville staple going back at least 50 years. Bobby continued, trying to be peacemaker. "Before you shut us down, Sheriff, I just want to say one thing. If you think Harold Hughes is going to show up with his little hammer, do you really think he's going to be able to wipe out an entire bar? I mean, isn't this the safest place to be, Sheriff? With other people?" Brunson didn't want to be the villain again. For some folks, this week had seen him go quickly from White Knight to Grim Reaper, showing up to wave his big axe through the umbrella of fun. Before he could even respond, he got a call on the walkie. There was a Harold Hughes sighting. Bobby heard the message. Brunson yelled at him and everyone else to get inside. Bobby turned ice white and shut the door behind him as Brunson peeled off down the road. Harold Hughes turned out to be Chris Mintz. Chris Mintz was a local delinquent who Brunson had multiple run-ins with over the years. He had been kicked out of high school and was now seen around town doing odd jobs and causing general mischief. Apparently, Chris Mintz thought it'd be hilarious to show up outside of his girlfriend's house, dressed as Harold Hughes. When Brunson showed up, Mintz was sitting on the curb with his hands cuffed behind his back. It took every ounce of Brunson's human decency to restrain himself from telling Mintz to bite the sidewalk so he could cave in the back of his brains. He told his officers to bring him downtown, even though what he really wanted, deep down, was to let him loose and have the real Harold Hughes find him. But he swore an oath, and no matter how angry he was in this moment, he didn't want to lose sight of what his job was. Protect and serve the people of Hardinville. It was starting to get dark. One more day, he told himself. One more. One more.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.
Do you have a dark curiosity? Heart Starts Pounding, Horrors, Hauntings, and Mysteries is a weekly podcast hosted by me, Kaylin Moore. Each week, I'll take you on a dark journey through terrifying true urban legends, bizarre true crime cases, chilling tales of backwoods horror, and more. So if you're looking to join a passionate community of the darkly curious, check out Heart Starts Pounding on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, stay curious.
Monday. The cops were exhausted. They couldn't wait for this day to end. Tuesday morning was going to feel like every other holiday rolled into one. The healthcare workers who had been holed up in the still under construction medical facility on the other edge of town had remained completely professional and upbeat during the entire weekend. Brunson wished everyone else had their sense of responsibility. They did not. In fact, people seemed to be having a great time. The cops could no longer keep up with enforcing the curfew. Half the town was now seen walking around for what all of them referred to as, quote, exercise. The wealthier residents would get upset when officers scolded them for being outside. They would raise their voices up to disrespectful decibels and tell the cops that they had to remain active. Keeping them inside was bad for their health. The cops couldn't disagree. They had spent nearly 3 days cooped up inside of patrol vehicles. Their bones felt brittle and their heads were pounding due to their caffeine and sugar diets. Brunson refused to throw in the towel. He went back to the station for a moment of reprieve. He checked his watch. 7 p.m. It was getting dark. Shelley told Brunson that she's been getting calls all day. Everyone is outside. All of the bars are open. The curfew had officially been broken. "It's a party out there, Sheriff," Shelley said. Brunson checked his watch again. 7:02. He couldn't stop checking his watch. This was almost over. He told himself again and again. Keith said that his daughter would be proud of him. That was it. That was exactly what Brunson needed to hear in that moment. Keith was only 18 and he knew the perfect medicine for Brunson. That was how Brunson knew that Keith would be a good leader one day. Hopefully, he could hand him the sheriff's keys when Father Time came a-knocking. "Are you happy now, Sheriff? Harold Hughes didn't show. You won." Brunson turned. He slowly walked over to the holding cell. Sitting in there was Chris Mintz. Brunson stared daggers deep into Mintz's eyes. Mintz leaned back over his cot against the rough, faded lime green wall. Brunson gripped the holding cell bars. He squeezed as if he was holding on for dear life. Maybe he was. "My daughter's dead, scumbag. If that's a win, what kind of game are we playing?" Mintz gulped, took a beat. Better not to poke the bear when it smells meat. Mintz spoke, much more measured this time. "I'm sorry about your daughter, Sheriff. She seemed like a very fine young lady. Never paid much attention to me, but such is life." "Yeah," Brunson said. "Such is life." Brunson opened the cell door. Mintz was confused. He sat up, tense. "Sheriff?" "Go on. Get out." Mintz stood up. He couldn't tell if this was real or a setup. "Now." Mintz weaved and dashed over towards Keith's desk. Brunson told him to give Mintz his personal belongings. Keith followed orders until he got to the last item. The Harold Hughes mask. "The mask too, Sheriff?" "Yeah," Brunson said. "The mask too." Keith took out the mask and held it out in front of Mintz. The twisted irony was not lost on Mintz. He knew that Keith's father had been killed by Harold Hughes while wearing this mask. So Mintz took it, but he didn't put it on. Keith followed Mintz towards the front door and watched him walk outside. Night had arrived, the final night. Mintz stood alone on the silent street and looked towards his left. Keith just sat there by the entrance, watching him. Mintz turned around. He was still holding the mask. Keith waited to see if he would put it on. There were 3 people who have seen the real face of Harold Hughes: Dr. Gibson, Jamie, and Keith. Keith was with his father that night in the hospital. Nobody knew that Keith had seen his face, his real face. Keith's father had knocked off his mask during their struggle. It fell onto the floor as Keith lay nearby in shock, crying out for his father. When Harold Hughes bent down to pick up the mask, he could see Jamie, right there, on the ground. By all accounts, Keith was the only person that Harold Hughes had ever spared. Why? What made him lucky? When Keith stared at Chris Mintz, he tried to see behind his eyes. His nose, his hair, his height. They looked different from Harold. Yet in that moment, they felt the same. Few people know what reflects off the shadow in the devil's eyes. But Keith did. He could see it every night when he went to sleep. Keith continued to watch Chris, holding that mask just below his waist. He never put it on. In fact, Chris Mintz was never seen again in the town of Hardinville. Tuesday morning, 7 a.m., 0 deaths, no Harold Hughes. The world was still spinning. It was a success. Sheriff Brunson had kept his town safe. The debate can rage tomorrow and forever about whether or not they had overreacted. He had done his duty. No fathers had to get a phone call that their little girls had been murdered. That's what mattered most to Brunson. He could barely keep his eyes awake when he finally pulled into his driveway. Greeting him would be his German Shepherd, Knox. His wife, PJ's mother, had passed away when PJ was a little girl. So it had just been him and Knox for almost 2 years now. Knox was ecstatic, but Brunson was running on fumes. The only thing he had enough energy to do right now was to pass out until his body felt like it had blood in it again. As soon as his face hit the pillow, his phone rang. He rolled over, picked it up. Yeah. He sat up quickly. His bloodshot eyes went yellow. What? 13 bodies. That was the number at last count. Down at Westbrook Lake. It was the big summer camp resort 1 town over from Hardinville. Turns out, some maniac with an axe had chopped up a bunch of camp counselors during the final night of the summer. For a second, Brunson thought he was dreaming. He asked Shelley if they knew who did it. We have his name, Sheriff. His name is Justin Vernon. Brunson got to the edge of his bed, rubbing his eyes, as Knox waited patiently by his feet, hoping to go out for a long walk in the summer sun. I don't understand. We did everything right, Shelley. Shelley took a beat, and then she told him. You did everything right, Sheriff. Our town is fine. This wasn't your jurisdiction. I just thought you should know, because they might ask for reinforcements in case Justin comes back.
Avoiding your unfinished home projects because you're not sure where to start? Thumbtack knows homes, so you don't have to. Don't know the difference between matte paint finish and satin? Or what that clunking sound from your dryer is? With Thumbtack, you don't have to be a home pro. You just have to hire one. You can hire top-rated pros, see price estimates, and read reviews, all on the app. Download today.